You're waiting for. Do you even know anymore?
These are people who work hard but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
Disconnected.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new live stream. It's been a while, but we are back. We're ready to go, and we have a lot to get to. We are 3 weeks away from Election Day. We are finally in the home stretch, and we have a lot of early data. We have new states pouring in. We have Nevada. We have New Mexico, which, again, we're not going to get into all the states in depth. That's not what this is about because, it's very early on in a lot of these places. But I will say that there isn't a point of data the Democrats can look to and say, well, we should be really confident right now. And I'm sure we'll get into the super chats. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions, and we will be getting to all of them when the time comes. But I must say that it's good to be back, and we have a lot to cover because we have 3 weeks to go. And like the stream down below, subscribe, make sure you hit the bell. We're going to get going here. And we have our first day of in-person early voting in Georgia. Donald Trump at his rally today in Georgia, he did tell people, he said, get out and vote. He said, you better go out there tomorrow, first thing tomorrow, go vote. So you have a lot of people that are going to probably be voting early on our side. They shattered the turnout record in early voting. Democrats are happy because they still are operating under this Neanderthalic perspective where early voting or high turnout helps the Democrats. And in a place like Georgia, depending on where the turnout is, it can help the Democrats. But the problem is there's not a lot of positive data for them. There's not. Because we went and we looked at the demographic data, and it's true. We saw it earlier in the day before we had access to it. There were no lines in Fulton. There were very minimal lines in DeKalb County, Georgia, where Atlanta is. The Atlanta inner suburbs, you didn't see that level of enthusiasm you even saw for Joe Biden 4 years ago, let alone Barack Obama, among a lot of these black voters. And there's definitely a lot more black voters now because of the 2010s era. You had a little bit of a mini reverse great migration to a lot of these places like Georgia, like other places, but mainly Georgia for black individuals. And you were seeing in 2020 a 40% of the early vote, including day one, those were black voters. The mail-in votes were through the roof. A lot of these low propensity black voters never voted before. Many of them didn't even probably know or can't even remember if they voted or not, but it is what it is. But you don't have that this time. Defortification, whatever you want to call it. You're looking at Georgia. The black vote in Georgia is 30%, including the mail. Including the mail and the first day of early voting. It's 30%. That should skew Democrat. You're talking, and we could pull up the swingometer, which I think we're going to be using a little bit, reset it to 2020. 32% of the electorate was black in Georgia in 2020. That is now, the early vote is going to be more black, especially the in-person early vote, the Abrams machine. They used to have the Abrams machine. Abrams, a little bit, I don't know, she's probably busy at McDonald's or something, where Kamala Harris used to pretends that she used to work at. But that's where Stacey Abrams actually eats. That's where she lives, where she does everything. There's no Abrams machine this time. She's too busy at McDonald's. She's too busy at the Cracker Barrel or whatever, wherever all the food is. She's busy there. She's not getting these people's ballots because her machine, it just kind of collapsed on itself. And you're seeing it. And Brian Kemp, credit where it's due, defortifies the system, gives his team to Trump, makes sure that they're going to get those ballots out. And they're getting them out so far because you're seeing it even from 2022. The black share of the electorate is significantly down in Georgia, and it's also significantly down in North Carolina. In-person early voting hasn't started there, but you're talking about Democrats having a 32-point advantage even in the midterms where they, it didn't do so well. They had a 32-point advantage in the early voting, the mail ballot requests. And now you're seeing it going down to a 9-10. Obviously, it's kind of stagnating. Republicans aren't taking the lead. It kind of has fizzled out. There's kind of a wall they're hitting. But still, that wall that they're hitting is not exactly where the Democrats would like for it to be. They're not, capping out at a 20-point lead. It's now under like a 10-point lead, or maybe it's a little bit over 10%, depending on the day. The Democrats keep going down. The Republicans stagnated. There's more independents, but they're not really building up that lead. That's a major problem for them. They were anticipating, they were banking on that lead. They don't have that lead. They don't have a lead. And what that tells you is there's not a lot of support for Kamala Harris in the black community, which is why she's panicking, which is why she's bringing out Obama to insult people. That's why she's, having her surrogates talk down on young men, and then she tries to put this agenda together, and it's hypocritical. Just, she wants to bring up the weed thing again. The last time she did that, she got completely destroyed. Her political run in the Democrat side was over. Now she thinks it's going to win over voters in the home stretch. What is she doing? It's called a losing campaign. It's a losing campaign. She's not getting the margins. We need to do our part. It's not over. But bearing some extreme disaster for Republicans, and I'm not talking about a hurricane because I think that the effects of the hurricane in terms of voting were overblown by some people. Given the amount of people displaced, given the amount of people currently without power, given the fact that the early voting facilities are poised to open at the original start date before the hurricane in those affected areas. But when we're talking about Georgia, North Carolina, I think it's extraordinarily difficult. And I'm honestly getting close to saying Arizona and Nevada as well belong in this category, not from the early voting data, but from a lot of things. When the Culinary Union says that Kamala Harris is not winning Nevada right now, and the same Culinary Union is more accurate than the polls. When John Ralston, of all people, is saying Trump might be the slight favorite right now, Trump is the slight favorite right now. Make no mistake about it. They don't want to admit that stuff, but they're forced to admit it now because it's true. The polls may be underestimating Donald Trump in the state of Nevada. They may be underestimating him everywhere. It doesn't even have to be by much because he's already leading everywhere. He's up everywhere. It doesn't matter. But you look at the early data and it just confirms the black share of the electorate. It's down. Even if you want to say that in 2020, there's no vote shifts between any demographics towards Trump, but you want to bring that down to 30.1% of the electorate or so. Donald Trump in Georgia, 1.5% win. That's what we have him at now. That's what we have him at now. He could do better than that. Now, it's true he may do a little bit worse with college whites. I mean, Herschel Walker still got 60% of them in a midterm year. If Herschel could do that, you think Trump probably is going to get it. But you can't compare the 2 years. Definitely you can't do that. It was like a Trump plus 5 electorate. But you're seeing a whiter electorate so far than the midterms, which is, again, not good for the Democrats. But, even if we put it down to 55-42, it would have to be somewhere in that range, realistically, for Georgia to stay in the Democrat column. It would. And that just assumes a modest dip in black turnout. 1% of the electorate becoming less black is essentially 1 point to Trump anyways. Just do the math. Not only that, Donald Trump, with those black voters that are showing up, is likely doing significantly better than he did in 2020. It may not be a ridiculous amount. He may only get 10%. Let's just say 10%. That's on net a gain of 8% from 2020 because Georgia blacks were heavily Democrat and are more Democrat than black voters in Pennsylvania or even parts of Michigan or parts of, Nevada and Arizona where they're significantly more Republican because there's less of that connection to the South and the, civil rights era, which is already dwindling because of the younger generations. And it's partially why the younger generations of black men in particular, but black voters as a whole are more likely to embrace Donald Trump. It's because of that. It's because you don't have that same exact, tie to the Democrat Party. There's no obligation for a lot of these people. And the more celebrities you see coming out and endorsing Donald Trump, you're kind of seeing it become over time more socially acceptable. And it's not just in the black community. It's in the Hispanic community. It's with young white men in particular. Maybe not so much among women, but women will go the way that their, boyfriends go or their husbands go over time. It's just the way that these things work. Communication is key. rationality is key. Obviously, unmarried young white women are going to be overwhelmingly Democrat, and the same thing goes for women of other ethnic groups as well, but that's beside the point. What we do know is that the early voting data in Georgia is not looking good for the Democrats. Where it's coming from, even in Fulton County, is coming from the white areas, and it's the same thing that we're seeing in Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, where the inner city, black communities in Pittsburgh, they're not exactly all that enthused, but it's the white communities, the very high propensity, white liberals. They do well financially, and they may have postgraduate degrees. That demographic is the one voting heavily for the Democrats so far in places like Allegheny, where you talk about the returns being high. Democrats will talk about Detroit. Detroit always has high returns at the get-go. If those returns stay the same over time, we could talk about it, but there's plenty of other communities that are doing very well, and there's in terms of those returns, and they're going to catch up. We could talk about that. I'm sure somebody's going to bring it up in super chats because everybody likes to panic. It's like, folks, you got to vote. I don't want to hear this happens, so they might be doing this again. Folks, we know what they're going to try to do. It's up to you to counteract it and not complain about it and actually do something, because I feel like some people feel like, what's the use of voting? Those people are a bigger enemy to us than the left, because they're constantly just being counterproductive. The left doesn't even need to do anything to win at that point. Those types of people, I look at them with compassion. I'm just saying we got to get them in check and make sure we vote. I'm not saying that there's no potential shenanigans, but I will say that when the mail-in requests, the mail-in votes are significantly down, there's a lot less room than 2020. When the RNC demands and wins lawsuits in Detroit and they say you hire Republican poll watchers at the same level and those lawsuits work, what does that tell you? It should tell you that there's a lot fewer room for these shady ballots to come in. It's true. There's going to be a lot less room for these shady ballots if that's what they're doing, which is what they're doing. You have defortification laws. You have all sorts of laws, all sorts of everything across the board that's benefiting us from 2020. That doesn't even talk about persuasion. That doesn't even talk about the economy. That doesn't even talk about immigration, foreign affairs, whatever, because all those things are helping us. Everything's helping us except maybe abortion, but I don't think you're going to have too many two-time Trump voters flip on abortion when Donald Trump himself is not really a hardliner on the topic. In fact, some people are even worried about evangelical turnout being a little bit lower because Donald Trump doesn't really talk about it. But at the end of the day, a lot of those people were super voters for Mitt Romney and John McCain. They're going to be voting for Donald Trump, make no mistake about it. Or at a minimum, they're going to be voting against Kamala Harris. But you do have a lot of Christians that don't vote in high enough rates, and we're definitely trying to up that participation as the election cycle goes on. And I think we are making progress with a lot of low propensity voters, which is very important, and it's just as important as getting the super voters out to vote, because the super voters are usually going to get out to vote. But we need to make sure that we get these low propensity voters out to vote, whether people that, voted only for Trump twice, make sure they vote, or people who like Trump but have never voted before, or maybe they voted in 2016 but forgot in 2020, or vice versa. That type of demographic, we need to make sure we get them out to vote. And I think we will get enough of them. I just hope that it's enough to give us a resounding victory. But, when you see the Democrats, on the other hand, they're not doing so hot. And you have a lot of people who never voted in 2020. You had, how many votes did Joe Biden gain over Hillary Clinton? He gained 16 million. Trump gained 11 million over his 2016 totals. What does this exactly tell me? It tells me that which of those two do you think is more likely to drop off? The person that gets red pilled during COVID and comes into Trump, you think that person's going to not vote for Trump again, especially when they wanted to see a Trump second term and they don't like the left? Or is it the people on the left who maybe have bought the BLM lie, bought the COVID lie, never voted before, just did the mail-in ballot thing, voted for Biden? They're more likely to drop off. And that's what you saw in Georgia, not to mention any people who may have not known they voted, ended up voting. But I will say that there are real people who were one-time voters in Georgia and voted for Biden, and they're not going to be voting this time in the high rates that we saw, which is it's brutal, because if that voter doesn't show up at the highest rates, especially because they're not showing up in the mail-in data, they're not showing up as likely as the Trump voter is to show up in person and vote on election day, You're going to have potentially some missing voters in the Democrat hands. And depending on what's going on in Virginia, that's another brutal thing. We may be talking about a competitive Virginia in a couple weeks. I'm not ready to go there yet. I still think it's not a high priority state. It's not likely to flip unless all the other swing states flip. So I think it's better to focus on all the other swing states first. Obviously, we get that, but there is something to what's going on in Virginia. Even New Mexico, I don't think it's in play, but the early data looks better for Republicans. It's abysmal for the Democrats in Ohio. Ohio is just like, it's just a red wave that we see in these red counties, these rural counties, and then in inner city Columbus, in college towns, whatever. The turnout is not there. It's just not there overall, which is not good for the Democrats because they need high turnout in those places to win. And I'm not saying they're going to win Ohio, but if they're not getting the turnout in those places in Ohio, they're not getting them in Pennsylvania. They're not getting them in Michigan or Wisconsin or Iowa or any other state. It is a gradient. It does carry over. Of course, Ohio's going to be redder than Pennsylvania by probably over 10 points or close to that at a minimum. We understand that, but still, if he's doing better in Ohio, or if black turnout's down in Cleveland, it's down in Detroit, just because the return percentage is higher doesn't mean it's not going to dip significantly, because it will. It's down in Oakland County, Michigan. It's down in Flint. It's down in Philadelphia. It's down everywhere. That's a problem. That's a problem for the Democrats. Now, they can cope about it. They could talk about a firewall being 400,000 in Pennsylvania. We've heard that, and now they're going to raise it. They're going to have to raise it. It's a copium. It's just coping for them. It's a coping mechanism. They somehow believe that the Democrats barely outrunning their 2022 request in a presidential year is good for them. I don't know what to tell them. That's just not true. And you see all these ballots. They dropped in 71,000 mail-in requests over the Columbus Day weekend, the 3-day weekend. And not only did the requests get redder, but Democrats didn't gain on net in any of the request data. They gained 500 votes out of the 71,000. They could only gain 500 votes. These are all mail-in votes. These are all, early ballots. And I suspect when we get closer to the election, Republicans are going to hit 30. And they probably will in the returns, because this was the cope too. Oh, the returns are going to be significantly better than the requests, which again, if you have to say something that defies all logic like that and is even inconsistent with the past two, somewhat decent turnout election cycles, we're talking 2020, 2022, the post-COVID era, you're wrong. Plain and simple, you're wrong. You're very wrong, and you're honestly dumb, especially because a lot of the requests that are going to be more like, I'm going to go to the courthouse and vote in person type of thing, those are going to be more Republican, and you'll probably see them go up as the time goes on, and we're seeing it now. But you're already from 19% a week ago to 24%. By the time election day rolls around, Republicans are going to be in the low 30s, maybe 30%, around there. Democrats are going to be at like 57, 58. We'll even say 58 to 30. You know what it was in 2022? It was 69 to 21. So you're going from that to 58 to 30. 2020, 63 to 25. Those are requests. You're going to 58 to 30. That's not a place you want to be in as a Democrat, especially because there's less mail. And we talked about that. The voters that were like low propensity, voted by mail in 2020, they're not as likely to show up randomly on election day if they've only voted once in their lives. They're not. But those diehard Trump voters in 2020, they did show up mainly in person and voted in 2020. We have to make sure they show up again. But yeah, the Trump 2020 totals across the board, it's going to be enough. And he's probably going to win some voters that voted for Biden, a lot more than he's going to lose voters that voted for him twice to Kamala. And we know that significantly more. Every poll shows it. Every indicator shows it. Why would they not? Like, are you talking about like 1/6 or something? Of course, there might be an occasional person out there. But a lot of those people that cared about that and said that that was disqualifying, they never voted for him in the first place. And a lot of them voted for Biden in 2020. And among the Trump-Biden voters, Trump probably wins a good 20% of them because the real-world voter doesn't care about that. They go to the factory in Macomb County. They say, what do you think about the Capitol? And they're like, wait, you mean February 5th or whatever? And it's like, Yeah, they don't know. They don't care. They hear it. They're like, whatever. It doesn't impact their vote. They care about the economy. Same thing goes for these black voters. They don't care that Kamala Harris, at least the ones that are considering Trump, they don't care that she's a, quote unquote black woman. They care about, their jobs being taken by illegal migrants. They care about the, Social Security, all voters, older voters in particular, of all ethnic groups. They care about Social Security not being raided by illegal migrants being put on the system. They care about the fact that you have a sluggish economy, you have high prices, high inflation, and Harris is pretending like everything's fine and that she wouldn't change anything that Biden did. That's disqualifying to a lot of voters. It's disqualifying to a lot of Americans. And the more they dig the hole and the more they flip-flop, the more they lose, which is why when you look at the polling, Kamala Harris is not in a good position. Donald Trump in the battlegrounds leads on average by 0.7%. 0.7%. And you can get this mug on my merch store, by the way. 0.7% in the battlegrounds average. He's polling at 48.3%. He's polling ridiculously well. He's over a point in the lead now in North Carolina. Rasmussen dropped. They're the most accurate pollster in North Carolina in 2020 and Pennsylvania. He's up by 3 in Pennsylvania, 5 in North Carolina. We polled Michigan. We found a virtual tie, and we suspect that the poll was underestimating certain, non-college whites. We didn't exactly get the sample that we usually would have expected. And still, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, he was down by like a hair, which means he's winning Wisconsin, which means he's winning Pennsylvania. And when all the undecideds would be allocated, he probably wins Michigan too. So, and that's even with that sample. Same thing goes for Arizona, but I think he's up significantly in Arizona. I think he's up in Nevada. I think he's up in Wisconsin. I think he's sweeping the board right now. The Rust Belt, you could a little bit of a question mark, because I think that he's probably, given the data we have, given Virginia, given Georgia, and the early North Carolina numbers, which, again, we don't have in-person early yet there, but he's probably winning North Carolina and Georgia, and Virginia's probably looking a lot more like 2016 than 2020, if not even better than 2016 in Virginia. So you have that. He probably wins Arizona and Nevada. He needs one Rust Belt state. That's it. One Rust Belt state. I'm not saying he can't lose any of the others, but he's in a good position in those states. He needs a Rust Belt state. He needs Wisconsin. He needs Pennsylvania. He needs Michigan. He needs one of those states. Thank you, Nebraska, for being cowards, because they could have actually mitigated that. And I'm not saying Trump couldn't have, won the state of Wisconsin if he didn't have Nebraska or whatever, but it is in those Rust Belt states. And I will say this, there is something to this, because a lot of people are saying, well, 2020, I don't think that Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer want Kamala Harris to win. And you look at what Kamala Harris is doing. She mocks the Eucharist, the communion, in a state that has a lot of Catholic swing voters that voted for her and Trump or Biden, but are considering Trump. And she mocks the communion. And does it basically implying Trump was like a Dorito. She said, it's the CHIPS Act. It had nothing to do with that. Nobody believes you. Okay, nobody believes you. You lie about everything. You lie about COVID. You lie about all this stuff. Nobody believes what she has to say. But in terms of that, you can't do that. And I think she knows it. And now you're seeing these judges rule in Detroit in the Republicans' favor. The judges in Pennsylvania on the Supreme Court ruling in the Republicans' favor. When it comes to these things, you look at these people, you look at the party elite in those states, there's something about, why are they playing fair? Well, maybe it's because they don't feel strongly about this election. Because Whitmer wants to run. Josh Shapiro wants to run. A, he never wanted VP, but B, if he did want VP, he feels slighted that he didn't get VP, which means he's even more pissed. Why is he going to lift a finger for Kamala Harris? They'll say nice things in public, but when push comes to shove, do you really think they're going to move mountains at 3 a.m. for Kamala Harris? Absolutely not. They've already basically shown that they can't. It's a big problem. Now Wisconsin's Wisconsin, but even then, I think Trump is going to be in a good position in Wisconsin. And honestly, in all those states, they're already, you have a little bit of talk early on. There's more of a pivot to the down ballot. You have Alyssa Slotkin. She didn't say, I'm underwater to like the small dollar donors, donate so we can be ahead in the poll. Sometimes they'll do that for fundraising. She said the top of the ticket is underwater. We're not where we'd like to be. And what does that mean? It means Kamala Harris is losing Michigan, which would be in line with most polling. She's probably losing Wisconsin as well. Eric Hovde has a legitimate shot. He led a poll. It was an internal poll, but leading a poll is good because you could even argue he doesn't even have to lead a poll to win, given like the down ballot effects and given how bad polls are typically in Wisconsin. But Tammy Baldwin was viewed to be one of the strongest incumbents that the Democrats had, and Republicans are running Eric Hovde, and he's on her heels already. And this is typically a thing you see in the final weeks. It moves quickly. McCormick, if Trump wins by like 1, I think McCormick wins. Bob Casey has completely just lost his edge, if he even had one to begin with. He's not his father. Not his father in the slightest. It's like, at this point, it's like Mitt Romney running in Michigan. Yeah, you're not your dad. All right, everybody knows it. He's basically just a generic Democrat at this point, and McCormick gains every day. If he gets the Trump vote, which I think he will, he's going to win. And I think he might eat into some of those Harris margins in places like Chester County, Pennsylvania, some of the college-educated whites. He'll do a little bit better with that demographic than Trump, and he'll be in line with Trump in these other demographics as well. So, yeah, you can make a case it's the BOGO belt. If you buy one, which is the presidency, you get one free, which is the Senate. And could Donald Trump end up with 55 Senate seats to work with? Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't bet my entire bank account on it, but it's possible. I think at least if he does sweep the Rust Belt, I'd be shocked if he didn't get at least one of those 3. I think if he sweeps it, he gets about 2. But Democrats know they're cooked in Montana. They know they're cooked in Ohio. They know they're cooked in Texas. They can talk about Texas. It might be closer. It probably is going to be closer than the presidential race, but they're not getting Texas. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So as things stand today, they're in a lot of trouble. The early vote data, not good for them. The polling data, not good for them. The fundamentals, not good for them. Biden's approval, not good for them, but also on the issues. And I was thinking about this earlier, and it's 100% true. When you have these undecided voters who don't like Trump or Harris, what are they going to vote on? They're going to vote on their top issue. And assuming the top issue is not abortion, Donald Trump has an edge on it. And for most people, it's not abortion. So those voters are going to vote for Trump most likely. We just need to get these people out to vote. And we'll get to all the super chats, and we're going to cover it. But you can't, like I said, I'm still waiting on the fundamental that really looks good. I've done a lot of research. I've tried to scrutinize it. Want to make sure we're not missing anything here. And we need to keep getting people to the polls, the low propensity people to the polls as well. But when you look at what's going on here, it's like a lot of low propensity voters that are being targeted. We got to keep targeting them and get them out to vote, and we're going to win this thing. It's got 3 weeks to go, but that's a long time in politics. So we'll see. But we are going to get to the super chats right now after this water. And there we go. Marilyn Degatti 83 will lead us off saying, "Hey Rep, I've been hanging voter registration signs at stores in my town thanks to your homework video you made about getting involved to help." Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And most people need to watch. If there's one video of mine you need to watch, it's that video. This is how Trump wins, forget the polls video. If people can get involved, they need to get involved. Like I said, if we only get 100 people involved from that video out of like the 100,000 people that saw it or will see it, that's a lot. But I just want to make sure that we can do what we can do to make the difference, because I'd feel bad and guilty if we're not making a difference, because we need to make a difference. So that's the main takeaway. It's not about persuasion at this stage in the game. It might be for some people, but you're not going to persuade the hardcore liberal or the person who's voted Democrat their whole life, which is a good portion of the electorate. You're going to maybe persuade the low propensity voter who is iffy to vote. That's one thing, and then get them to vote. It's a 2-part system of persuasion. That's pretty much about it. Johnny Heartdog for 10 has been thinking about the trouble that could occur on the left if Trump is declared the winner. The word trouble is mild, YouTube won't let me say, but you get the idea. The chaos between election day and inauguration day, lawsuits, recounts, it'll be chaotic. I feel like if Trump wins, the pendulum will swing back. People just need to be safe. Are they going to be able to get away with like throwing the results in the trash? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. That would be doing something that I don't think they really have the power at this stage. But the one thing is with Kamala Harris, it's funny because they made the law change because they knew Trump was right, that there was an authority to maybe kick back some of these results for debate in the legislatures. The problem with this whole thing is that they can't do that exactly anymore on their side. Even though they have more of those chambers in places like Michigan on their side, they're not going to be able to do it as easily. So they kind of screwed themselves over with that one. But who knows? The conviction, potentially the sentencing for Trump, how will that go after the election? It's not talked about, but will they try to use that to justify him and say he undermined his presidency? I'm sure they can try, but we're not there yet. We have to get him elected before we have to worry about any of that stuff. But yeah, people need to be safe and don't be stupid, and that goes for our side as well. We see what they do to us. Also for 20, Johnny Heartdog says not too worried about turnout for two reasons. One, Trump voters know what's at stake. Most know if he loses, it's the end of the country. Two, Trump, Musk, and the campaign have been hammering voter turnout. Well, I know, and they have, and that's good. And we need to keep doing it. Because if we just said, oh, it's going to be fine, which I think we did in 2020, despite the polls looking far worse, it's not quite enough. You got to keep getting the votes in the ballot box. And we did a lot with a minimal ground effort in 2020, which is huge. And it shows the organic popularity of Trump's movement, even though his campaign in 2020 was lackluster, especially compared to where it is now. Because now it's like he's giving everybody a reason to vote for him. The question is, are enough people paying attention? Hopefully they are. Hopefully we get those people out to vote and go from there. But so far, the Democrats are having a problem as well. Hopefully that problem doesn't translate into our side and start to impact it disproportionately in the upper Midwest, which I don't really think it will. But Sir thinks a lot, says America 2024. So true. Donald John America 2024. Chief Officer Henry Wild says, I've been looking at the early voting data and all the blue on the map is scared. Is this Well, yeah, of course. Democrats are supposed to be the ones voting. They're voting by mail. They're voting early. But the map is not as blue as it was 4 years ago, significantly redder than it was 4 years ago. And that should worry them, especially because not only are their numbers down, our numbers are up, which on net means we're doing better. There's no positive way to spin it. You could say that we're cannibalizing voters, or you could maybe say all their voters are going to magically show up on election day. But from what we understand, it's unlikely they get that turnout from 2020 as things stand now. We're more likely to get 75 than they're likely to get 81. And that's kind of the benchmark. And it definitely varies by state for sure. And I don't even know if we're going to get to 75. We may not need to get to 75. At least, we just got to make sure we win enough swing states to win. We're already basically guaranteed 219 electoral votes out of the gate. And if this black turnout issue keeps up, we might be talking about 251. We might be talking about going from there, which is easier. But I don't think we're at a point where we can say, because of one day, we're going to win these two states. No, but it looks encouraging. Trump is favored in North Carolina. He's favored in Georgia. He's favored in Arizona. And possibly even Nevada. Maybe not as big of a favorite, but still a favorite. Roxy Loyola, thank you for the 10. XJ Cherokee Bear says, I have Trump at 2016 minus Nevada plus Michigan. That's 297. I could see that happen. I don't think Michigan's a done deal. I think it takes a lot to move those, to get that margin there. It depends on the overall turnout that we end up seeing. Apex Caliber says the Yankees win Aaron Judge for MVP. I don't have any comment on the Yankees. Also telling you Virginia will... Well, I'm not ready to say Virginia's it. I would like to see Virginia in the coming days and weeks. If it still is, if Republicans gain from this point on in the early voting, Democrats did not get those ballots. Never came. They never existed. Like I said, they're becoming George R.R. Martin from South Park with the pizzas. It's like the ballots, they're on their way. Every day I see it. The ballots are on. They're not on the way. They don't exist. You never got the ballots. Maybe they will come at the last minute, but they're not getting them in the time frame they were supposed to. It's unlikely you see this massive cavalry. Like, they'll get some. I'm just saying, when you open all these precincts up in the Nova region and then Republicans are the ones that gain, that's not normal. That shouldn't be happening, but that's exactly what happened in these places. Republicans are the ones that are energized to vote, and they're probably going to carry the election day vote as well in these places. All New Year 2024 says thoughts about Harris plus 5. It's not Harris plus 5 Gallup poll. Gallup does a running average of party ID. It is a very schizophrenic average if you look at it month to, or week to week. One thing I will say is what matters is that their quarter 3 data is fully done. And when you aggregate the quarter 3 data and you go back election cycle to election cycle, it is the number one predictor of the national popular vote. You could do it. 2016, it was D plus 3. It was off by less than a point. 2020, it was D plus 5. It was off by half a point. It was spot on pretty much in 2012, 2008. 2004 was, it underestimated Republicans by a couple points. 2000, same thing. Was dead on in the 90s. So you go all the way back, it's an accurate indicator. And it now shows R plus 1. Republicans never have had that advantage, but they have it now, which should tell you that Donald Trump has a shot at the popular vote. That's what it tells you. It doesn't show Harris leading Trump by 5. Apex Caliber says DeSimpson and Massey are aggravating. Yeah, you have this guy, Thomas Massey. He's supposed to be the conservative. And he is a conservative, in a lot of things he's relatively tries to be like libertarian, whatever. And then he's promoting people that are writing in his name for vice president and writing DeSantis's name in for president. The primary, it was lost for your side how many months? 9 months ago. You're still bitter about a primary. Seriously. These people are not serious. And Rand Paul's another one. Everyone likes to talk about Rand Paul. Rand Paul, even though RFK Jr., all these people endorse Trump, he still won't do it. He won't do it. He's hung up on the debt or something. Like, how many issues do we have to the country? You talk about the immigration problem. You want to talk about the debt and what the debt would be like with the mass migration, mass amnesty, Kamala Harris, this, that, and the other thing. You're out of your mind if you think that, Trump on the debt should be your top concern. No, it should not be your top concern. In fact, Trump on the debt, there's a lot more promise for term 2 than term 1 because he's got Elon, who is like the king of efficiency that's going to be working on that problem. And you're still upset for some reason. Like these pearl-clutching morons. This is exactly what they are. They're morons. I detest these clowns. The forever DeSimps, the principle. Like, no, you don't have principles. You're just a moron. Your principles are just being, an out of touch individual who can't see the big picture. That's what it is. That's your principle. Creeked says Pennsylvania return is concerning. 2021 or 2021 day Georgia was Sunday. It doesn't matter. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It's the calendar day. What we do know is that, in fact, it being higher now should be more encouraging for us because people don't work on Sunday. And the fact that people are going to work on a Tuesday and you have our numbers through the roof should be a good thing. Pennsylvania return is not concerning because they're catching up. If it stays at 24%, it would be concerning. If it's going up and going to catch up with the returns as it has every single, or the requests, as it has every single election that we've had this, then it's not really a concern. Not a concern at all. But let's see. JC1026 says, I live in Georgia, which safer early or probably, it's the same safety level. You could always track your vote. You could, if you live like walking distance to a polling place, you could vote whenever. But make sure you vote, and it's probably better to bank your vote. You don't have to do it today or tomorrow. You could do it like the last day of early voting or something like that, whenever you feel like doing it. But just make sure you do it. Like, that's all that matters. Just do it. It's all the same. All New Year 24 for 2 says if Trump wins on stream, well, if he wins on stream, he wins on stream. I don't have to do anything. It'll be a good stream. We'll have a lot of people. Panthers Kingdom podcast, is any chance we see fun? Well, of course there'll be some. The question is, are you going to be able to do well enough to outflank it? Are you going to do well enough to beat it? Because if you can't do it, then we're not going to win, but we have to do it. You know, Trump has to, if he only gets 65 million votes, then we're doing something wrong. Especially if their vote totals are down from 2020, we're doing something wrong. So we have to flood the zone. They love the term flood the zone with polling. We'll say it with ballots, flood the zone. We'll do that. But Ice Cream Junkie for 10 says Trump's polling and betting odds are better now than ever since Harris was installed as the front runner. Let's seal the deal and bring it home on November 5th. Yeah, I agree. Polymarket is through the roof. Polymarket, 58 point something percent. He's now at 35% to win the popular vote. I like those odds. I think that you could even say that he might even be a little bit higher depending on what the final polling average is. You know, the polling average is all left-leaning polls for the most part. That's the thing. The only poll that missed to the right that's in the aggregate is Rasmussen. Even Reuters went from +6 for Harris to +3. All the other polls in the mix, Morning Compost went down to Harris +4. She's not in a good spot. She's not. And this is with a lot of polls in there that are favorable to her, and she can't even get a 2-point lead when polls have underestimated Trump twice. NBC News, which had Democrats winning the generic congressional vote in 2022, now has a tie race, Trump leading in the full field. That's not good news. I don't know what universe those are good. That's good news in. But I digress. We got to bring it home. You're right, Ice Cream Junkie. Luke Newman says we can't get complacent and we can't. Well, of course not. I don't see a reason to cope. I think that a lot of people, a lot of the talking points on the left are just, they keep moving the goalposts. I haven't seen anything like it before. Now all the Democrats, they're magically going to show up on Election Day in Georgia and Virginia if they've never voted on Election Day before. That's a little bit of a tough task. It's a tough thing to get them to do. But like I said, this is not over. People need to vote. Like, that's the one thing we got to make sure people do is go vote. Of course, people aren't going to vote if they don't think there's a chance to win, which is another thing which we need to make sure that people understand that Trump can win, whether they think there's any shady business or not. I think that the people need to vote more if they think there is that stuff than if they don't, because then that's the only way that they can, one vote can counteract two potential, it take two potential shady ballots to counteract your vote. So flood the zone with our ballots and then nothing can happen. At the end of the day, yeah, too big. It's got to be too big. It will be too big, hopefully. Sam Godwin, thank you for the 2. Steve Dow says, are you familiar with Mark Halperin? Yes, I am very familiar with Halperin. He's been right about a lot of things, and I've called it as well. Like, I didn't believe him at first when he said Biden was dropping out, but when he did drop out and verbatim everything happened, the one thing that didn't happen was the open primary, but I thought they were supposed to do that because they knew Kamala was not a strong candidate, and then Biden, to stick it to all the other people, endorsed Kamala out of the gate, and they're like, oh, man, we have to do this. And then Obama gives her an awkward endorsement on the phone a week later. Like, yeah, it's pretty obvious that Kamala Harris probably may have not been like the initial choice, but it did make sense for some because they kept the money, whatever. They still raised a hell of a lot of money anyways, though, to the point where maybe it didn't matter. There was a lot of donations for Biden that were like frozen from these people, and they kind of wanted to wait, and they just threw him away like he was, Trump said during the rally, it was like taking candy away from a baby, yeah, basically. And they installed this person in that position who is arguably just as incompetent and just happens to be younger. But the more people get acquainted with her, the less they tend to like her, and that's why she's kind of peaking in the polling that we see. But Mark Halperin, to get back to Mark Halperin, he said that the race would go back to where it was, essentially, where you would have the Sun Belt states back in Trump's column when all the dust settled from the debate or whatever, and you would see Pennsylvania go to his column. Michigan and Wisconsin would be toss-ups. And I still think you could argue Pennsylvania and the polling is close, but the fact that Trump is up in Michigan, that wasn't even a part of it. But he was right. As time goes on, Democrats knew that it's not sustainable. And now they're left to pick up the pieces. And now she has to button mash. And now she has to go on Fox News. And she wants to go on Joe Rogan. Probably not going to end up going on Joe Rogan. Because I think they'd realize that the format is not really for her. It's not going to be favorable to her. They're probably negotiating to get a different format. I don't think Rogan's going to say yes. Meanwhile, Trump is somebody that can thrive in that format. So, I mean, folks, like I said, they're not doing too well. And Mark Halperin's been right about a lot of things in the internals. I believe it. They're acting like those internals are real. They're acting like it. Let's see. And then that is an important interview on Fox. And you can say what you want about Fox. You can say what you want about not trusting Brett Baer or whatever. He's going to be fairer than 60 Minutes. And you're not going to see some interview question on Fox get edited out and replaced with another. That was disgraceful, what CBS did. Nobody will ever talk about it. But again, election interference by mainstream media. Yeah, they should lose their licenses if they're going to be acting like this, because it's not free press. It's opinion press. It's true. It's opinion press. It's not news if you're going to be doing that. It's deception. Sir Thinks a Lot says, get out and volunteer at vote count locations. Yeah, people worried about the security of the elections are best served becoming poll watchers or something along those lines. Andrew Broadwater says, Pennsylvania doesn't even pay for return postage for mail-ins. Moose says, where's your merch? I thought you had hats. And, well, I never had hats. I've thought about hats, and maybe we'll add hats eventually. But, let's see. Where was the... Okay, right here. No, we don't have hats. We might get hats. We have coffee mugs. We have tank tops. We have shirts. We have the great Trump iconic design. We have a lot of shirts. We got great merchandise on the site, and I'd encourage people to check it out regardless, but we don't have hats, at least not at the moment. To get the Trump iconic design as like a hat, I feel like there could be something done. I'd have to talk to the merch guy about that one, and I've been meaning to, because I think it'd be cool to have hats, but who knows? Maybe we'll get, if Trump wins, we'll probably do some like Black Friday deal or something. Apex Caliber says Rich Barris says Maine and New Hampshire might be in play. I mean, they're going to be closer. I think Maine is a more attractive pickup because it's more working class. I think New Hampshire is a little bit tougher. It has changed since even 2016. It's changed a lot since Bush won it back in 2000. And again, with the third-party vote being high, he was able to. It's going to be a little bit harder this time. I think Maine, yeah, it's possible he could do better in Maine. Because it is more working class. And I think you're going to see in the northeastern part of the country, the margins in some of these places, especially the working class heavy states like Rhode Island and Maine, they'll be looking more like 2016. The more, upscale college educated states like Connecticut, you're probably not going to get the 2016 margins, but you still might do better than 2020. Might do a little bit better. Not a done deal yet. Let's see. But got more super chats here. Let's see. Tide says, you were wrong in 2020. Why are you right now? Well, was I wrong in 2020 is the real question, because people will excuse people that had Texas going for Trump by 1. But people that said that Wisconsin would go for Trump by 0.1, and they were off by 3.7% less, those people get vilified as inaccurate. So in terms of the state of the race in 2020, I think I was more accurate than probably about 90% of predictors. We nailed the Senate. We nailed the House. The House, we were more accurate than anybody in the House. The presidency, nobody really gave Trump a shot. So in terms of what we know now, it's also some election. I didn't expect the turnout to be what it was, too, in some of these places as well. Whether people want to chalk that up to one thing or another, they're more than welcome to. The bottom line is I don't really think I was all that off. The fact that the states that were quote-unquote off were decided by 0.2%, 0.3%, 0.6%, and 1.2%, is that really inaccurate when some people had states like Texas going blue, Florida going blue, North Carolina going blue? All of those states went for Trump by more than any of the states I listed there. I had Michigan going blue. It did go blue. So I think the margins were relatively accurate. People can debate if margins should matter more. I think they should. I think they both matter. But I don't think the 2020 prediction is anything to look back at and say, well, this is wrong. Now, as for 2022, because we nailed 2021, we nailed 2023, we didn't nail 2022. We're a little bit off base, to put it lightly. The main reason is the educational makeup of the midterm electorate was not at the presidential level with Trump on the ballot. We expected it to be even less educated than a presidential election, which was extraordinarily a case of malpractice in retrospect. So I was wrong on that note, but we're not gonna do that again. Hence why we got 2023 so accurate. Alex says, what happens if Trump wins? If the liberals could they go? Well, listen, it's possible that could happen. Will it be worse than 2020? Probably not. I feel like a lot of people have expected a Trump win. I don't see Antifa doing insane things every weekend in Portland like we saw in 2016, even before the election. So we'll see. They might make a resurgence because there's a market for it. But it seems like a lot of these people are kind of burned out when it comes to the Trump thing, the Trump hatred. And it possibly could translate to the ballot box and cause Trump to win by a sizable margin in some of these places. Let's see. Hold on a second, guys. I got to pull this up. I don't know why the screen... Okay, there we go. Gerald Armstrong says, we got to Pokemon go to the polls. Yeah, we do need to Pokemon go to... Just regular go to the polls. We don't have to quote Hillary, okay? We get it. I get the meme. But we got to get people to the polls. That's true. But, she said that and she couldn't get those people to Pokemon go to the polls. But I don't think it was because they were too busy playing Pokemon Go. I just think they didn't like her. Mike Oxard says, opinion on the Trump by 3.5 Michigan poll today. Well, from Barris, I thought it was interesting. I think it's kind of bullish on Trump. I think that it's very possible that it's overestimating him. But while people like to trash Barris's polling, I don't think they understand his track record, especially in 2016 and 2020, where he was pretty much spot on across the board. He had a Biden +1 in Michigan in 2020. He had a Trump +1 in Michigan in 2016. He's been pretty accurate overall. I don't know if Trump is up by 3.5 or if that's his final poll, but it's still encouraging to see that because I know he puts a lot of time and effort and a lot of nuance, and few people are understanding how to poll the seniors. And he put that on his stream. He oversamples the super seniors, the 75 pluses, because they're going to be voting differently than the text to online demographic of 65 to 74-year-olds who might lean a little bit more to the left, and it's kind of something that pollsters typically have been missing this cycle. And usually they're wrong when the exit polls drop. They said, Florida, because of the seniors and COVID, you didn't see a big shift to the left. Maybe a little bit of one, but even like the Villages, 2 points? It's not going to be enough to counteract the Hispanic vote in Miami-Dade County moving right off a cliff, soon to vote for Trump by dictator margins. Apex Caliber says, I think Trump might get 35% in New York City. It's possible, but that wouldn't be enough to get him New York State or even get it within 10. I think he could get 30 easily. But even if he gets 30 in New York City, 55 in Long Island, and 10% better everywhere else, he's still not going to hit, he'll get it within 10, but it's not even going to be, I don't know, he's not even going to get Zeldin margins there. But it does depend on turnout. I just don't think New York State is going to be in play. But I think that Trump is going to do unprecedentedly well there. Especially because, like I said, the demographics in that region of the country were favorable to Biden in a time of chaos. Now they're not. And even then, Trump in New York City did much better in 2020. Now there's a lot of room to grow, especially because all these cases that they've been trying to throw against Trump, they're not very favorable to him. They're not favorable to them, all things considered, because they have backfired. Ice Cream Junkie says, does it concern you that House... Well, look, the guy that said that he wouldn't certify a Trump victory also said, or he also voted against certifying Trump's 2016 victory. So I don't think that's really the benchmark. I will say that Democrats aren't going to control the House anyways. There probably will be Democrats that vote against certifying Trump's victory. I just don't think it's going to be enough. Patrick's has guessed the Minnesota margin, probably Harris by like 4. But you never know. The problem is that there's a lot of like leftist people in Minneapolis. In 2016, it was competitive because a lot of them went third party, and then they went to Biden. Now, some of them might still go third party over like Palestine or whatever. Is it going to be enough? I doubt it. Maybe like the Somali community might give another like percentage point to like Jill Stein or something, or take it away from Kamala. Rock Dog says, if Trump gets 1%, in the swing states, would there be any recounts? They might try, but it's unlikely. If you win by like 1% in Pennsylvania, that's like 100, maybe not 100,000 votes, but like 70,000 votes. They might try. Like I said, it's not likely. It's not likely to happen. John Cordisco's Corner says, what do you think about Georgia's early voting doubling? Great. People like live in this timeline. I'm not saying you, but I get a lot of people saying, Georgia's turnout's high. It's like, good. We want high turnout. I don't understand it. So many people, they live in the old days where our high turnout was something that was considered, and it was for the Democrats, considered to be a good thing. But now the low propensity voters are our voters. Maybe not like, in the inner cities of Atlanta, but that turnout's not high. It's low. It's way down. And it's a big problem. So I think that it's a big thing to what's it called? It's a big thing to happen. I think we need to keep it up, and hopefully in our areas it stays high and we can milk as many votes as we can. And the same thing happened in Virginia. Democrats were celebrating, turnout's high. Then they look at it and it's all from the red areas, and they're like, but the ballots in the blue areas, they're going to come. And it's like, they're on their way. And how many days have they said that? And every day they say it, it doesn't happen. And then the margin in the state, according to the most accurate modeler in the state going back to 2020 that I know, it's like every day he's like, it's down to 5%. It's in the 5% range, which is like lower than the margin Hillary won it by in 2016, which is not good for them, by the way. Michael Skelton says, what percent chance would you give Trump winning the popular vote? I think 35% is fair. I think 35%, I think it's going to be about a third. A third chance that he wins the popular vote and the electoral college. A third that he wins the electoral college but loses the popular vote narrowly. I'm probably still in that camp right now, depending on what happens over the next week or two. And then the last scenario would be the nightmare scenario, which is just a loss, which can happen, which is why people need to get out and vote. But we got to keep going. You can watch the betting odds. It's fun. You can look at the polls. You can watch me. But if you're not voting and getting everyone else that you know to vote, especially if you're in a swing state, it's not going to help out. And if you live in a deep blue state or a deep red state and you've never voted before because you think it doesn't matter, we want the popular vote. So get out and vote. XJ Cherokee Bear says, Rep is Harry Sisson with a brain and testosterone. Well, that's a low bar anyways. We got to raise the bar higher than that. I mean, let's be real. That is true. I have more of those things than he does, but there's a lot more that'll separate me and that clown. FM32047 says, thinking Hovde and Rogers are going to win. McCormick and Lake have a decent shot. Also, in Maryland could be similar to Massachusetts 2012, not a Republican. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, being a good scenario for Hogan, it could be like a Massachusetts 2012. In terms of Hovde and Rogers, I'd love for that to happen. I am more bullish on McCormick than I am Rogers or Hovde. I think Lake, it would take a Trump win by like 5 at this stage in the game to carry Lake, no pun intended. I don't know. Ruben Gallego's able to go do this thing where he gets a bunch of money. A lot of it's out of state, and he's like, I'm the moderate guy. And then everybody knows the name because, oh, he's a congressman. Oh, he's from the family. They had the mayor of Phoenix or whatever, and a lot of people live in Phoenix. And it's like, oh, well, he says he's a moderate. He says he's going to do stuff for the border. And then he's got these ads in Spanish that, are targeting the Hispanic vote. And he is Hispanic, so he might do well, even though Lake has done well with Hispanics as well. So, again, who knows? It may be an upset, but I'd say that she's definitely a sizable underdog at this stage in the game. Papa Tango says every Republican needs to early vote, get it banked. I tend to agree, but also make sure you get people banking early votes that are low propensity voters as well. Make sure that your friends and family who they may not vote, get them to vote. Just get them to vote. Those people exist. We can't have people being sitting ducks, then complain for the next 4 years, because that's going to be painful. Rock Dog says, what are the chances of Trump flipping Virginia? I mean, I think it's 20%. I don't think it's very high, but I would have told you 10% a week ago. So do with that what you will. It's a moving number, moving target for sure. Chief Officer Henry Wild says, my estimate is 73.8 million for Trump, 74.7 for Harris. I have Trump losing some from 2020 because of J6 not conceding. I mean, that's possible, but those numbers are a Trump win. I hope you know that, and I hope the people in chat know that. I could see that happen. I just see you got a little ratioed there on the likes to comments, but you're not wrong. Trump will. There are voters that voted for Trump twice who won't show up. My only contention is there are going to be a lot of voters who never voted for Trump that are going to vote for him, more so than the inverse, because Democrats maxed out in 2020, and even then they barely won. And they were maxing out, and they're not doing that right now. War Eagle 3035 and Jair Rodell, thank you for becoming members. Denton says, what's your opinion on Osborne? Well, he's a grifter. He's going to lose by 10, by the way. I'm not too worried about Nebraska, but if you live in Nebraska, don't vote for the independent. It's a grift. Democrats want to get a Senate seat through the back door, and we can't allow that to happen. Patriot 345 says, day one, early turnout in Georgia, 57 white, 30 black. 2020 was 48-40. Not good for Harris. Yeah, we covered that in the first part of the stream. It's great news for Trump. Apex Caliber says, if Trump gets New York from between 9 and 12, will Zeldin redo in 2026? Well, it'll be a little bit harder if Trump is the president because of the midterm wave, but given what we saw in 2022, it's possible we could have an inverse of that. But I think it really just depends on several things that we might see. Is if Hochul's got a scandal that's new and her popularity's in the gutter, yeah, it's possible that you could maybe see him go for it again. I don't really think that it's going to happen. Linerex52 for $50 says, agree 100%. Somehow normally intelligent people like Rand Paul can't see the forest for trees when it comes to crunch time. Same for abortion absolutists. Yeah, they're not understanding the long game or the big picture. If you have your perfect candidate run for office, they get decimated. And I tell the same thing to the DeSantis people. He would not win nationwide in a presidential election, especially given his abortion position, a 6-week ban, wanting a national ban at 12 to 15. That's not something to campaign on or even mention, especially right now, right after the post-Dobbs era and the way that it was framed. All the other stuff would have been easy to stick. The Project 2025 would have stuck to them. Even when it comes to the Vivek stuff, because people were talking about him being a future candidate, some of his policies are intriguing, but I don't know if the American people are ready for all of his policies if he's going to be running on those. So again, I think we have to be smart about this stuff, play the long game. And you have a great vessel in Trump who listens to concerns of people he might not align with 100% of the time, was a solid president for 4 years, great foreign policy, great domestic policy. I just don't know what a lot of these people want. Gave pro-lifers the biggest victory they've ever wanted. Now the grifters are upset because they can't grift on anything. And you have a lot of people that are going to be upset about Donald Trump for having an accomplishment, but not willing to go further at a time when going further is not feasible from an electoral perspective. Even if he were to do it in office, they want virtue signaling more than they want results. How many times did we hear these other people virtue signal about Roe v. Wade and all this stuff? Who actually got it done is the real question. Donald Trump got it done. That's the way it goes. So Leon says accelerationists like Fuentes delude themselves thinking Harris will radicalize people if the last 4 years didn't. Yeah, exactly. The like far fringe accelerationist, it's like the Richard Spencer stuff like back in the day, like, oh, well, the Biden's more competent person. It's like, and like, I don't even know what he is now, like a centrist or something, but yeah, no, it's true. You look at the accelerationist mindset. It's wrong, and I've never been an accelerationist for those reasons. But like I've heard arguments about the Georgia runoffs, for example. We'll talk about that. We'll be like, oh, well, maybe people staying home will teach the Republican establishment a lesson. No, they take the wrong lesson from everything. That's the problem. That you can't teach these people. You can't boycott and expect anything. And if Trump loses a good chunk of the GOP, like in terms of the abortion people, they'll probably be like, well, he was too tough on abortion. Like, that's not exactly something that these people can understand. And then they're going to pivot away from it even further, more so than anything else. Well, maybe not on that issue as much as the Trump populist edge or the nationalist edge or whatever, but those things are popular. And they just don't understand it. Of course, you need it to be communicated properly. Henry Stowe says, different subject. Does Ted Cruz win or not? Yeah, he's going to win by 4-6. He'll be fine. Allred is, he's not running the worst campaign, but he's not even running the beta campaign of 2018, which was actually pretty well run to his credit. Let's see. Darth Chipmunk says Mike Rogers is surging as of late. Is it possible he outruns Trump? It's possible. The polls didn't have John James outrunning Trump from what I remember, but he ended up doing it at the end of the day. So it's entirely possible that he could when it's all said and done. Michigan nationalists says we need Michigan and Wisconsin rurals to go dark red, not pink. And yeah, it's not just the rurals. It's demographics. It's more than suburban and rural. It's true, like the college-educated whites and the rurals are going to be more Republican, and the working class whites in Ann Arbor are going to be more liberal. That's true, but when it comes to Michigan, this is how you win. If you're looking at the big screen right here, if Trump gets on net, we could even say 3 points more of the white working class vote, he wins. Nothing else matters if he holds his own. That's going to help him in a lot of counties. Counties like Kent County, which are far more left trending. So long as he can hold his own in those college educated white regions, he's going to improve in Kent County. He's going to improve across the board. He'll flip Muskegon. He'll flip Saginaw back. That's kind of how you win the election. There's so many moving parts to it. Even the counties in the Pennsylvania, the collar counties, like Chester County. Why did Dr. Oz do well in Chester County compared to Bucks County, compared to Trump? He outran Trump in Chester. He significantly underperformed Trump in Bucks. Why did that happen? Because Oz did okay with college-educated whites. It was the working class whites where you had poor turnout. And on top of that, the ones that did show up, even a good chunk of Trump voters, voted for John Fetterman. You could say why? Well, maybe it's because he looks like one of them and didn't appear as somebody from another state trying to buy the Senate seat. So you could say that that's not a good enough reason to vote for Fetterman, and I would agree with you 1,000%. But there's a lot of nuance to it, and there's a reason why some of these people do what they do. I don't make the rules. I would make them differently if I did. But Ash K2 says, on Reddit and Threads, I see comments from former Republicans defecting. Well, none of those people voted for Trump. None of those people voted for Trump anyway, so it doesn't matter. Reddit, yeah, some guy writes a Reddit account to farm karma. He's probably never a Republican. He probably never was. This is how these people operate. Trump is going to win 94% of the Republican vote, 93, 94 nationwide. He'll win somewhere in that range. Harris will win the same, maybe a little bit more of the Democrat vote. And then the independents now are breaking more for Trump, which was not the case. And I'm talking about true independents, which Broke for Trump in 2016, not so much in 2020. Now they're breaking for Trump, which is a good thing. The voters that have never voted before are breaking for Trump, and Trump is winning more Biden 2020 voters than Harris is winning Trump 2020 voters, and that's not even close either, and that's a good thing. So Mac Baby says, how do we know they won't cheat, etc., 3 a.m., no IDs? Well, because look at the mail-in numbers. Anything they do is going to be baked into the request data. We can tell when these ballots are requested, how they're sent out, how they're delivered. This isn't California. Yeah, California, they mail everybody a ballot. You have multiple cases where people will claim that they got several. And who knows what could happen at that point. They say there's no evidence of wrongdoing, but again, where are the investigations that are actual investigations to places like California? They're not quite there. It's a system that is objectively insecure. But in Georgia, in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, where you have to request and then get one, it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult, and now there's a lot more integrity legislation. And when a state like Georgia or even Arizona, where they did get some election integrity laws passed, when a state like that defortifies, the other states have to too, or it's an irregularity that will lead to actual problems. It has to be extraordinarily subtle, which is a major thing a lot of people can't grasp. It has to be subtle. If it's not subtle, then it's going to be exposed. But I don't think that you're going to have it for numerous reasons that I covered. I covered it in my video that I did, and I hope that it's not a fear that is going to cause people to stay home because you have to vote. Otherwise, you have no right to complain about election shenanigans if you did not vote. You have zero right to complain. I don't want to hear about it because you didn't even try to do anything to overwhelm the system. And I'm talking to those people. Jacob Davis says, why is North Carolina close? Because of polarization. I mean, it's not going to be that close if it's like, Trump wins it by 2 or 3. I don't know if that's close to you, but it's just the way it is. Now, the black vote percentage being down in North Carolina, I really fail to see, even if it's like, if it goes down to 19.8%, Trump wins the state by 2.5 points. Harris is not going to make that up among college-educated whites. She's not going to be able to do that. There's not enough room because she probably falls with blacks that do show up. She'll fall with Hispanics. She probably falls with other, maybe not a ridiculous amount. And I don't even know how much room she has to grow with college whites. Maybe she does. Maybe she flips it on its head. Maybe she does 10, we'll even say 10 points better on net. If she does 10 points better on net, like that would be enough. Barely. I just don't see it happening. So Johnny Hartdog says, plot twist, what if polls are overestimating Trump this cycle? Well, it depends on where. It's possible that they are in some places. I mean, they have in Georgia in the past where he leads by 0.7. But at this stage in the game in 2020, they underestimated him, and I believe every single swing state. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Even if it happens nationally, it's likely minuscule. So I will say that. If he overperforms the polls twice, and the pollsters have a midterm year where they don't understand why that they, in some places, overestimated the Republicans, and they have to change, and they change their methodology to be based off of the midterm year, then what exactly makes you think that they're going to be underestimating him in a presidential? Like, that's another question. Because it is possible, which is why people need to disregard them and get out and vote. But is it the likeliest course of action? I'd lean towards no. I'm sure they might here and there. They might be. I think they're overestimating him in Michigan right now. But you never know. I hope I'm wrong about that. Depends what the final polls show. Silver Witness for 10 says, is Trump going on Rogan? I saw Alex Jones say on X today that Joe turned down DJT. Well, he did before, I think. But I think Trump should be going on. I don't know. Alex Jones, is he always right about everything? No, if we're going to be honest. Entertaining guy, but, Papa Tango says, thoughts on John Deaton potentially upsetting Elizabeth Warren in Massachusetts. I like him for fighting for crypto. Warren hates crypto. He's probably not going to upset her, but I think it could be closer because Elizabeth Warren is despised in Massachusetts. She's not popular. She's not well liked. And honestly, if Charlie Baker was running for that seat, I think he would, in like a midterm year that was favorable to Republicans, he'd have an outside shot at victory. I think it's unlikely, but he'd have an outside shot against her because she's not popular. She's an underperformer both times she ran. Dr. Phil's forehead says, do you think the hurricane could lessen rural Georgia? Well, there's not that many people that have been displaced compared to what some people expected. And the power's returned. People are, in most cases, not across the country. They're in, if they did get displaced, they're in shelters. Early voting is going to happen at the same time. Our turnout is through the roof anyways in those places. I'm not too worried about it. I was initially. As of now, I don't think it's going to be by enough. This isn't going to be like a Hurricane Sandy drop-off in turnout, especially because those two states, like North Carolina and Georgia, they're swing states where people are going to crawl over broken glass, especially given the fact that you had a weak response. And some people will say, well, that's technically not the fault. Well, it's like you got to prepare better. It doesn't matter. You could say, well, the FEMA budget was cut 10 years ago. It's like, well, you do a little bit better. You got to do a little bit better than that. You got to prepare. It is true. You have a budget where money goes to illegals, and then you have people saying, oh, it's misinformation. Like, it's technically true that some of that money's going there. So it's like, enough is enough. They will never take the L. They'll never take the L. They'll just gaslight. The media is a gaslighting organization. All of them. Apex Caliber says, seems now even non-white working class voters are going to Trump. Well, that was going to be the case anyways, and I've said it. It's Trump is doing better with black voters with a degree, mainly younger ones, mainly men. He's doing better with Hispanics with a degree, mainly younger ones, mainly men. But he is doing better with, working class, significantly better. That's where the gains are coming from. And when you have people that are already disaffected with the Democrat Party, their communities are being decimated because of this mass immigration, even if they're second or third generation themselves, they're going to align with Trump, especially because Trump is a former president. Maybe a lot of people were afraid of him at first, but then they realized, oh, he was a good leader. He was a strong leader. I'm going to want to go back to these policies. And now you have COVID out of the way, and I think the realignment would have accelerated without COVID. I think Trump would have done significantly better across the board with all demographics. Especially depending on, obviously Biden as his opponent was selected. He was selected then too. They force-fed a turd in the Dems base at the time. They got everyone out of the way. They cleared the field for Biden because they knew that only Biden would have any shot at getting close to Trump. It's true. He was a weak candidate in many regards, but given the circumstances, he was a very strong candidate. He got to hide in the basement. They got the digital target voters with vote by mail, which is a lot harder for them now, and you can see the numbers. But at the time, yes, Biden was a strong candidate given the circumstances because nobody else would have even gotten close to Trump where they can maybe find a way to get him over the top. Maybe find a way. Just maybe. But what can I say, guys? We gotta win this election. We got 21 days. 20 days, actually, on the East Coast. So let's see. We have more super chats. Medic says, I feel like Scott Jennings would be a great White House press secretary. Thoughts? He's a Bush guy, but he's good on CNN. He puts CNN on his back. He carries CNN. He carries the network, which is good for him. Yeah, the autofocus on the camera, I've noticed it. I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but we probably should turn that off because it's kind of or actually maybe we need it back on. We need it back on, but it is kind of like shaking me around on screen. I noticed that, but it does look a lot better when it's on, so maybe we will keep it on. Who knows? Brett BR says, will you buy Trump's new coin? Probably not. I'm not really a crypto guy. I own a couple. I own some of it, but I don't know. I'd have to look into it, but it's not a priority. I'm focused on the election. UTIS4321 says the real reason Paul and Massey won't endorse Trump because they'll take us to war in Iran. I won't because of Gaza kids being destroyed. Well, look, Trump is the only candidate of these two candidates that can win that has showed interest in ending the conflicts. So if that's their concern, they should be more inclined to vote for somebody like a Donald Trump. And I find it ironic, given the endorsement from Massey of somebody like DeSantis in the primary, who is kind of more, it comes off as more hawkish. He was more hawkish on these topics. Antonis Andriotis for 10 says, should we get nervous if the swing states say too close to call? What does that mean? No, it doesn't mean they're throwing. They don't throw Trump votes away. That was not the problem. The problem was potential excess, not subtraction. You could track your vote, make sure it's counted. Everybody should do that, by the way. But how do we mean these polls reality? You got to vote. But they say too close to call when they're counting votes. That's going to happen anyways. Happens every year. 2016, 2012, 2008, even though not a lot of states were all that close in 2008, especially states that mattered. In fact, the states too close to call were Indiana and North Carolina, Missouri. All those are going for Trump. Maybe not North Carolina, but we got to get out and vote to make sure it will. Digital Lee says most RCP polls had Trump down 6 nationally. Safe to assume we witnessed him outperforming. No, he's not going to outrun by 6 again. And the reason why I say it is because there's fewer undecideds. But he doesn't need to. It is true. Polls that have him down by 4, that's like the biggest disparity. If they're off by like 4, Trump might win the popular vote. But on average, if you take the average, the overperformance for Trump could be cut in half. And he's still going to win the popular vote. That should tell you everything you need to know about these polls. Everything. Vercom Prasis says, did betting markets exist in 2016? Absolutely. They probably even existed in like 2012. Predict it was a thing back then. Everything was a thing back. I don't know about Polymarket. That might be newer, but I could be wrong. I think it was a thing in 2020. Mr. Hate Man says, why does Trump do poorly with Asians? Probably because a lot of these people come from nations where you have strong governments that people tend to be more obedient to. That might be part of it, but it's not uniform. Like the Vietnamese and the Filipinos, they're more Republican, and they're going to probably move more Republican. Like the Chinese voter, I don't know. It's interesting. It depends on which ethnicity that these people end up coming from. But a lot of them are, in these college towns. That's where they're overrepresented. There's a more liberal culture they come into. They assimilate into that. It depends. Your average, Asian in suburban Dallas is probably going to be more Republican than your Asian in the Bay Area and San Francisco for obvious reasons. So it depends. It really depends. War Eagle 3035 says, some Dems I personally know saying that Trump is getting crushed based off of early voting data. Well, that's not true. And you say this as well. You're right about this when you say my understanding is we're doing better than 2020. Yeah, I don't understand why they're saying he's getting crushed in early voting. I don't understand that. He's not getting crushed. You compare it to 2020, he's not getting crushed. By raw numbers, we did worse in a midterm year, which I don't like comparing. But because there's lower turnout, it's important for dramatic effect to now. Where we're at now, there's significantly less Democrats voting by mail. A lot of that is pandemic related. But then when they open up in-person voting, they're still not voting. Are they going to vote on election day? I'm sure a decent amount of them will. But you're not going to have 2020 level turnout. You're not going to have that, especially on their side. And that's a problem. It's a big problem for them. So yeah, I don't understand it. All of the data looks horrible for them. Or you could say, let's wait. It's one of those two things. Now, maybe you could say Michigan is the exception, but I tend not to understand why, because if you compare the return rates, typically in the places that the return rates are high to 4 years ago, it's about the same, and there's less ballots. So, and another thing is, you didn't have in-person early voting in Michigan back in 2020. So more Republicans potentially are going to wait in Michigan to go vote early in person. And the Democrats are more likely to utilize the mail system, which is, I think that you'd have to wait because, Pennsylvania is different. Michigan, Wisconsin, the dynamic has shifted. It's 100% different compared to what it was back in 2020. So Samuel Harrison says, how's Trump looking in Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina? Good in all three. He leads the polls. The early voting data in all three looks positive, but it's not done. We still need the return rates to match up. So people, if you have a ballot, you got to return it. Make sure it gets counted. And go from there. If you want to vote early in person in Pennsylvania, go to your courthouse in your county. You can do it. I would encourage people to do that, by the way. I would. Eris Walker says, will New York and New Jersey become swing states by the 2030s? It's possible. I wouldn't bank on it. New Jersey's interesting. I'm intrigued about Rhode Island still and Delaware. But then again, Democrats are going to be laser focused on Kansas at that point. But hopefully we'll be able to counteract that with those two. Based Cat says, even Shank is coming out and saying that the phony Kamala campaign's imploding. What leftoid reaction do you want to see the most if Trump wins? I don't know. Every time it's a new thing. I don't think Shank is going to have he probably, his meltdown's going to be more angry at the Democrats because I think that he's not going to have a 2016 or even 2020 when he had the mini meltdown. But he's going to, I don't know. He's going to, his meltdown's probably not going to be as bad. Especially you see other people that were on that show as well, like Anna Kasparian having the meltdown, just yelling about, I have no respect for women voting for Trump. I think you're effing dumb. You think she'd say that nowadays? No, partially because she has kind of become a little bit more sane, I guess. She's kind of become more sane. She's I'm not really on the left as much anymore, but she's clearly still on the left. But you're not going to have the same level meltdown is the main point. You're just not. Agent K says, why should I encourage Dems? Well, you shouldn't encourage Dems. If I say tell your friends and your friends are Democrat, you don't have to tell them. But, you should encourage people to get out and vote that are going to be voting for Trump. But I will say overall, high turnout is at a point where it benefits us, and that never used to be the case. The fact that high turnout, but again, there's nuance to it. Lower turnout from 2020 still probably ends up benefiting us. And that's true. Michigan Nationalist says, were you at the game? We smoked them 47-9 RIP Hutch. Yeah, I was. Club seats too. Great view, but sad. Worst blowout win ever because of the Hutchinson stuff. Apex Caliber says, Maris just dropped a Kamala +5. I'm not surprised. Marist. Yeah. Well, they had to do it. And it's not surprising at all, to be fair. It's not going to be their final pollster. I personally just don't think it's going to age well. I mean, they dropped a Harris +2, then they dropped a Harris +5. It's incompatible with some of their swing state polling, but whatever. They literally had a Biden +11 as their final poll in 2020. But no, that's going to go in the aggregate. It's basically going to replace Morning Compost as the Harris +5, but we'll see. We'll see. That's, it's probably garbage. You're right. Silver Witness for 10 says, rumors on X now that Trump will be on Rogan with Kamala. If this is true at all, she must be extremely desperate. Well, how's that even going to work out? Are they going to have a debate? I'd rather have him have a debate as him hosting the debate than any of these other mainstream media people. But maybe they'll have a Trump segment and then a Harris segment, a back-to-back. I don't know. Again, I think you can make the case regardless. It's a net positive for Trump because whenever Kamala gets exposure, typically it weakens her, especially in that format. But when Trump's been getting exposure in that format, it's helped him. So I'm not particularly worried about her being platformed on Rogan. Some people might, so long as Trump is able to be platformed in the same way, because I think it helps Trump and it hurts her, especially in that format. Now, if you're going to do a 3-on-1 debate like you see in these mainstream media debates, the 3-on-1s, yeah, that's a problem. I don't think those really, I'm not saying they hurt Trump. I think Trump actually won in terms of the sway of the voters, because I don't think people watch that debate and they're like, I was going to vote for Trump, but not now. I think you may have had more of the inverse, which de facto makes him the winner of the debate, just like the 2016 debates all over again. If Trump wins, people are going to look back on the debate. Well, he smoked her. He had really good energy. Now they're not going to say it. Just like in 2016, they wouldn't say it, but they will. He did win big on substance. In terms of the style, though, it's not really productive. And I'm glad he's not doing another one. But if he does a different style of debate, maybe that could be the way he does it. It could be interesting. Eris Walker says, Sheriff Grady judge for Attorney General. American Nerd 76 says, I saw something on X that said Biden warned Iran that a threat to Trump's life would be considered an act of war. Thoughts? I mean, yeah, it's strange. we could talk about, well, Biden's saying this because he's just stoking the flames of war overseas, and he's just using Trump as a pawn for that, and maybe that's the case. But part of it, I feel like, and we can make fun of Biden, he had a really, really bad moment today as well. I don't know if people saw it, where he was like talking about Trump in the debate, and he's like, Trump is so afraid of the debate because he lost big and he's afraid to beat her again. It's like, what the hell is he talking about? But now Biden is trying to undermine Harris, and it's so funny. It is so funny. I love watching it. Oh, yeah, she was a part of me every step of the way. Yeah, it's not. He has to know that. I believe that the little brain cells that he has left, he understands that Kamala Harris is somebody that's a part of the coup that pushed him aside, and he doesn't want her to win. I don't think he wants her to win. He may not vote for Trump, but I don't think he's going to end up voting for her. He might write somebody in. He might write himself in. But I think there's a good chance he does vote for Trump. We talk about Delaware. People will say, oh, you said this about Delaware. Yeah, and it's true, because I think Delaware could be a lot closer than people think. I don't think Trump is winning Delaware. I don't think it's necessarily in play. But if it comes in and it ends up being Trump or Harris plus 8, am I going to be surprised? No. Would I be surprised if it's Harris plus 14? No. But I think it's going to be far closer to the 2016 margin than the 2020 margin with Biden in Delaware. So, Carter W15 says, is early vote favoring Dems? Look, early vote is favoring Democrats, but it's not favoring Democrats by the margins that they need to. And in some states like Arizona, which it's very early in Arizona, it's favoring Republicans, which may be the case at the end of the day. The problem is you have a lot of like these more McCain-type Republicans in that Republican share in Arizona. So it's not a one-to-one. But no, it's not looking good for them in Georgia or Virginia or North Carolina or Pennsylvania. It's not really looking all that great for them in Michigan when you dive into the numbers above return rate percent from counties that typically have earlier return rates. So, yeah, I don't understand why they're trying to claim that. But again, 20 days. Jeffrey Bryson says, do you think Trump passes 320 electoral votes and can he win New Jersey? I'd say probably not to both of them. It would take a massive victory, and he'd have to flip states that we're not talking about. And I'm not ready to join the Virginia hype train, the 8th swing state. I'm not ready. Okay, I'm just not. Purple Potato says, thoughts on Minnesota Senate candidate Royce White saying the bad guys won. Well, look, I'll say this about that. He was taken out of context. He was taken out of context, and people are going to go out there and they're going to say, well, he said this, he sympathizes. It's like, if they listen to the quote, he doesn't say that. He has a quote that's similar to certain other famous quotes over time. He's not exactly saying what people have misconstrued it as. Now, if you're running for political office and you say something like that, you probably don't want to say anything like that because you understand how it's going to be misconstrued. So that's just what it is. But no, I don't agree. You're trying to bait me on that one, and it's not going to work. MSU fan says Trump needs to go back to Wisconsin. Am I going to Madison Square Garden? I'm not going to Madison Square Garden. That rally will be crazy, though. I hope it's a packed house. It's going to be a packed house. But no, of course not. Trump is, I'm not going to Madison Square Garden, but Trump does need to go back to Wisconsin. So that's that. So we've finished Super Chats. We got more on the way. Apex Caliber says he wins Virginia. He wins the night early. Shenanigans stop. Well, I do think that if he wins Virginia, he still has to win other states. If he gets Virginia and North Carolina and Georgia, he's not quite there. I think he would be at, 265? Or no, 264. He'd need Nevada. So he'd need Nevada or Arizona or Wisconsin. You'd like to have it. I would love to have it. I'm not ready to join the hype train. I'm sorry. I'm just not. Will we get there? Maybe. Am I more bullish on Virginia than I was a week ago? Absolutely. But we want to focus on the states first that we need to win. But if you live in Virginia, get out and vote. If you live in North Carolina, get out and vote. Regardless of where you live, get out and vote and get everybody else out to vote. That's what matters. That's what matters. So, yeah, I think we covered a lot of bases on this stream. We'll probably stream on Thursday. The election's coming up, so we got to get as many streams in as we possibly can get because we're knocking on the door. We really are. And we've got a little ways to go. Not a long way to go. And early voting is starting. And it does look good for us. I don't see a single data point that doesn't. Or at least that doesn't. It's either neutral or positive. That was not entirely the case in 2020. In retrospect, it was not the case in 22. We just undershot our targets in many places. But absolutely. So we could look in regular chat. I don't think we have anything. Okay, we have another Apex Caliber says Pennsylvania is the new Ohio. Virginia is the new Pennsylvania. Well, Pennsylvania is not the new Ohio. We're not there yet. All right, we don't even have the party registration yet, but we're getting it down, and it could be even below 300,000. So register people. If you're in Pennsylvania, you got to get people registered. We want to get that advantage down under 300 and just under 300,000. The goal was 330K. Now it's 312K, and the active registration is like half of that. So we're in a good position overall in Pennsylvania with the registrations, but we would like to do a little bit better. We're doing a great job. We've cut their advantage by more than half since the last election, which is huge. And that definitely has to translate into something. It does. Some of that is people changing their registration. A lot of it is not. Purple Potato says, what did you mean with Kansas 2030s? Well, I'm saying that Kansas could be a state that in the 2030s, just because of the growth you see in like Kansas City, spillover Johnson County, trends can change. There's going to be a lot of unforeseen demographic shifts, but Kansas could get closer. You got a Democrat governor there, which again is it's not always an indicator, but it's not entirely a state that is moving in our column. Trump only won it by 14 after he won it by 20. This cycle will be interesting to gauge it if it gets closer, but something weird is going on in the Great Plains. Might be a concentration of like old school Republicans in these places or whatever. But, you know, the rurals are deep, deep red. They vote like the Deep South in many cases. But the problem is these, you know, suburban areas that are growing significantly. Someone said abortion is the number one issue for most voters in all polls. I don't know what polls you're looking at, man, but it is not the number one issue. I've seen it at most as the number 3. Depends if they break up the economy. If they break up the economy, it's either 4th or 5th. It's immigration and the economy. Those are the top 2. Inflation, if you want to separate that from like jobs, then it's abortion's not in the top 3. And even in the midterms, it was not as high as people make it out to be. In certain states, it was high, like Michigan, because of the the nature of the race, and in Pennsylvania because of the nature of the governor's race in those places. But it's not going to be an important issue nearly as much as 22. By the way, it was a state issue. It is a state issue now, which should help Trump because Trump is not trying to nationalize it. Harris is the one trying to nationalize it, which I feel like the appetite for codification is not in a position where they can campaign solely on that and win despite everything else. It's not. MSU fan says Trump needs to do a rally in Pennsylvania with AB. Well, he's going to the Steelers game, and I think he's going to the Penn State-Ohio State game as well. I could be wrong about that, but they're going to have this guy. He's a interesting guy named Antonio Brown. You may have heard of him. He's a former wide receiver, was one of the best receivers of the 2010s, and he's got a little issue that he self-describes it as CTE. You may have heard of that as well, but he's a big Trump guy and is going to be doing all he can to register voters and is doing probably more than about 95% of conservative influencers at getting out voters in Pennsylvania, which is a state that matters. And that's what he's going to do. I don't know if Trump rallying with Antonio Brown, I don't know how that would work out because Antonio Brown is kind of a crazy guy. But I don't know. We'll see. Let's look at the regular chat as well. We're gonna leave the stream probably in about a few minutes here. I know it's late, especially in the East Coast. It's approaching 1 a.m. We'll go for a few more minutes though. So, is Georgia early voting bad? No, it's great for Republicans. I mean, you look at the black vote percentage, it's way down. The Republican exurbs like Paulding County, oh, they're way up. They are way up. And this is compared to 2020. I think it'd be very hard to see Harris go out there and win Georgia or go out there and win North Carolina. And depending on how Arizona goes, there's a chance we could put Arizona in that column too. But we got a long way to go. Georgia wasn't seen. Well, it was a swing in 2020. I just don't think people expected the volume out of Fulton County and DeKalb County, which begs some questions. I think it was the most shady state of the 2020 election. But what I will say is it was barely enough, and you don't have the volume in the mail request for that anymore. Or even the in-person early vote. You don't have it. Why do I hate Massey? I don't hate Massey. Well, look, the thing is that he has TDS. He's basically encouraging people who don't live in competitive states to write his name in for president. You're a sitting member of Congress. Your party has a nominee, and that's what you're busy doing right now. Like, that's not something that I feel like is a productive use of time or resources. But just don't tweet that. You have people who like some of your ideas, but are kind of skeptical of you because you have this weird like TDS edge. Why are you doing this type of stuff? Like, that's not something that I would call good politics. And same thing with Rand Paul, because he's not endorsing Trump for some reason. And again, you have the most liberal senator in history, far left nominee for vice president that's on the other side. And she's more radical than Biden. And again, doesn't matter whether she has Congress or not, she's going to be able to get a lot of the agenda passed. And we know that. So that's kind of the problem that we have. Dova Budgie 100 says, don't worry, I got Pence. Well, we need everybody to get people involved in Pennsylvania. What's up with the Florida early vote? It's still far redder than 2020. People say we're down. It's like, it's the early vote. We don't vote early. The fact that we're starting to is good. The question is, how much are we going to win Election Day by? I think we're going to win Election Day probably by less than 2020, but there's going to be a lot more vote that day. There's more Republicans voting early. So the question is, we'll know the totals. We'll know the totals and the ranges that we probably need. We're going to do the final prediction on November 4th. We'll probably wait for the Seltzer poll to drop out of the state of Iowa, among other things. So let's see. We're probably going to end the show. So anyways, guys, make sure you like the stream down below, subscribe, hit the bell so you never miss another video or stream. And I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.